You're watching GrassRoots TV, America's first community television station.
Today is Friday, 11th April 2008. We are in the GrassRoots television studio in Aspen, Colorado. We're reviewing Wiley Joe High. Joe's birthday date is 30, that's my birthday, 30 June 1943. We're just about twins, Joe. The people attending the interview are myself, Lieutenant Colonel Dick Merritt, United States Marine Corps retired, and a camera operator, Ian Fellman. And the organization that we're working with is the Roaring Fork Veterans History Project, the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and the Aspen Historical Society. Welcome, Joe. Good to have you here.
Thanks, Dick.
Joe, you're a Colorado native, and you have a background here in the state. And let's start out where you were born, Joe.
Born at St. Mary's Hospital in Grand Junction, Colorado.
Just about a local boy then.
Yeah.
And what did your father do when you were being raised?
Dad had a peach farm, primarily peaches, so we raised a little bit of everything between Clifton and Palisade. And we raised peaches and pears and apples and apricots and cantaloupes and tomatoes and just about anything.
You're making me hungry, Joe.
Didn't have very much money, but we ate well.
Well, there you go. Well, Joe, you were born during World War II was just getting on in 1943, and Camp Hale was up where the 10th Mountain Division was, which is an organization that was very strong in forming the ski industry here in the United States. And did your father have any dealings at all with the 10th Mountain Division at Camp Hale, Pando?
Well, my dad was too young to be in the First World War and too old for the Second World War, and being a farmer had a deferment, but he did have a truck, and so he used to make deliveries from Grand Junction up to Pando, up to Camp Hale during the Second World War. And one of my first memories of going with my dad was after the war, and they were tearing down buildings at Camp Hale, and you could have lumber if you came up and got it. And we went up and got lumber and helped repair or build part of a barn for our milk cows. I don't remember much about it other than just getting to be with my dad, which I love to be with my dad.
That was great. So Camp Hale went west. Was there any, do you know if any buildings were moved away from there?
Yeah, actually, some of the old barracks were sold, and many of the peach farmers in the Palisade area would get the old barracks and use them for either as converted garages or sheds, or in my dad's case, like a lot of them, that's what we housed the migrant laborers in during harvest time, when the peach harvest. So we had a pretty small farm, so sometimes we just have like one family, but that gave them a place to live during the harvest time.
Do you know if any of those buildings might still be there?
I haven't been by my old place for a few years, but I bet you that building is probably still on the farm.
Let me know,
Yeah.
because it brings back a lot of World War II nostalgia.
Right.
To know that everything wasn't disappeared, and there may be some down in that area. So that's interesting. Well, where did you graduate from high school?
I graduated from Central High School in Grand Junction in 1961, and then went to Mesa College for 2 years. It was a junior college in those days. That was before it became a four-year school. And then after Mesa, went on to the University of Colorado graduated from the University of Colorado.
What was your field?
My major was physical therapy.
Physical therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And you entered the Army, and at that time, the draft was going on in 1962. Let's see, 60. Yeah. What year was that you went in the Army?
I went in the Army in '66. My senior year at the medical center in Denver, the med center didn't send in the deferments on time, and so I got my draft notice. So I got to experience going through the draft physical.
I see.
Yeah, but then paperwork caught up, and I got my student deferment back, and then I graduated and finished in September of '65 and went in the Army in April of '66.
So you more or less had a choice because you were in a professional field and didn't have to go into the infantry. You had a good...
No, Vietnam was starting to build up, and they were looking for physical therapists because of the need, because of the casualties, and so I always felt pretty fortunate. It's a horrible way to learn, but it was a tremendous learning situation for me to be involved with the number of casualties coming back from Vietnam, and so I was able to use my degree and not, have to be one of those that got shot at. So I felt very fortunate.
Can you tell me a little bit about your training experience in that you weren't in a boot camp type of thing, but you must have had some training to make the transition from your profession into the military?
Yeah, all of the Army medical people, whether they be doctors, dentists, veterinarians, nurses, physical therapists, they go through the Medical Field Service School, which is at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, which is also where Brooke Army Hospital is. And so I went through about a 4-week, we call it officer basic, certainly nothing like what you went through in the Marines. I think I marched 3 times, and but they taught us how to wear a uniform and salute, and we went through courses on the Geneva Convention and on rules of engagement, and really try to get you to appreciate what you're trying to do and the responsibilities you have. And then I was assigned to Brooke after going through that period of time.
Well, we appreciate all the therapy that all the wounded ones have, and of course we're going through that today. We'll talk a little bit about the disabled American veterans who were here last week, and we in the community here of Aspen all volunteer to help them out. So after you left Brooke, where were you assigned?
I spent 13 months at the 121st Evac Hospital in Korea, and at that time it was about halfway between Incheon and Seoul, and had been there from about 1951, and this was 1967. In the early 70s then it was moved into Seoul, so it's no longer where I was stationed. But it was about a 200-bed hospital. We had all specialties except OBGYN, because it was an unaccompanied tour, so we didn't have the need for obstetrics. But we had neurosurgery and neurology and general surgery and internal medicine, and we were a very, very busy hospital. And physical therapy, there were 2 of us, two Army therapists, and then we had 1 Korean therapist, because we did see some Korean patients, and we needed someone that was could speak Korean. And So it was a very interesting year. Learned a lot. It was, and at that time it was, did get too much publicity back here because Vietnam was going on, but they had over 600 shooting incidents on the DMZ that summer, and that was also the year that the ship, the Pueblo, was taken. The year I was over there, which you probably remember that incident, and so it certainly did have some wartime characteristics, but nothing like Vietnam was.
Well, I was in Vietnam during this period in '66 and '67s, but I didn't hear anything about any 600. We were, taking care of ourselves up on the DMZ.
You bet.
DMZ in Vietnam. When one thinks of Korea, what comes to mind mostly in the American audience is the MASH television series. Of course, you weren't a MASH unit; you were a hospital unit.
Right. Evacuation hospital is the next step up from the MASH unit. MASH unit's supposed to be totally mobile, and evac unit is supposed to have some. You're supposed to be mobile, but by that time, after being in one place 17 years, it would have been hard for us to have picked up and moved very easily.
Were you getting just Army personnel into your hospital?
We had mostly U.S. Army. We did see some Republic of Korea soldiers. There was their Camp Pendleton was about 3 miles away from our hospital, so we would get some Republic of Korea Marines into the hospital sometime if they needed, more of the expertise that we had. And then we had civilians, particularly if they were injured by getting hit by one of the U.S. vehicles or whatever. Then we would have people in the hospital like that.
Foreign claims incidents where American forces, I was involved in that in Okinawa, where I was, we were helping any Okinawans that got hurt, that we were, the probable cause of the injury. So we took care of that.
Yeah, we called it the Phantom Deuce and a Half syndrome.
Phantom Deuce and a Half?
So they always seem to have been hit by a deuce and a half.
Yeah, deuce and a half truck, or driving through the pineapple field, one thing or another. Well, you were there for about a year in that hospital, and then where were you sent next?
I came back to Colorado and came to Fitzsimmons in Denver, and I got back to Fitzsimmons in late March of '68, and Fitzsimmons had, because of the Tet Offensive, which I know you're personally familiar with.
Right.
Fitzsimmons had gone from a 500-bed hospital to a 2,000-bed hospital in really a very short period of time. So as an example, in physical therapy, we saw about 500 patients a day. And so it was a very, very busy place to be at that time.
To the best of your knowledge, Joe, do you know what the disposition of Fitzsimmons and the property down there is today? Fitzsimmons Hospital?
Well, I'm personally very pleased with what has happened, because when it closed back 10 or 12 years ago with some of the military closing, and then no one knew what would happen with it, and it was in essence given or sold at a very low rate to the state of Colorado. And just last September, both Children's Hospital and University Hospital have moved on to the old Fitzsimmons campus. And I actually got to be a patient last fall.
Did you, Joe?
Over there in the new hospital, and I think it's built right where the old bachelor's officers' quarters were. But it's really great to see the space utilized the way it is, and there was about 300 acres there, and around the country, most medical schools outgrow their existing places because they're inner city and there's no place for them to move to. That had happened with the University of Colorado down at 8th and Colorado Boulevard. And so they've been able to expand. A number of the biotech and technology companies have put their research facilities on the property in conjunction with the university. And I think that CU is on track to become one of the finest medical centers anywhere because of this ability to expand, and the facilities are beautiful. It helps that Philip Anschutz has put a lot of his money behind it. The inpatient pavilion is called the Anschutz Pavilion, and so it's really quite a go visit it, Dick. Don't get Aerovac out of here like I did to get to go see it. So.
Did you go to the VA part of it or to the university part?
No, I went to the university part. The VA is still, the VA hospital in Denver is still down by the old medical center.
I see, yeah. I'm in the VA system, Agent Orange from Vietnam. I'm down there every 6 months, and I must say that once you get into the system, I really feel that they really take good care of the veterans. The problem is getting into the system,
right?
You know, with the budget and all that.
Yeah,
you know,
I tried a couple of years ago to get in, and I don't think it's been rescinded, but I was a couple of months late because they had put a moratorium on what's called Category 8 vets. I don't have any. I've got some health problems, but none of them are service connected.
I'm Category 6, which is Agent Orange for Vietnam, but I'm okay. But anyway, let's go back a little bit to when you entered the Army. Where were you working? Where were you?
I had the last hospital I had interned at was General Rose Hospital. It's now called Rose Medical, and I basically finished my internship on a Friday and went to work for them on a Monday, and so I worked at General Rose until for only about 4 months, and thought I was going in the Army in January of '66, and it got held up until April, and I'd quit my job at General Rose, and I was mooching off some relatives. My cousin was the head electrician at Vail Associates. Vail was 3 years old, I think, at that time.
Oh yeah.
And I was mooching off of him and skiing every day, and I got to feeling guilty, so I actually went to work for Vail Associates, and my first boss was a guy that had just retired from the military, Sergeant Bill Brown.
Oh my gosh, we interviewed Sergeant Bill Brown. I go to visit him whenever I go to the VA hospital. He's living down in Grand Junction. He's an unbelievable man, and I'm sure you have some respect and stories about Sarge.
Well, Vail, of course, was started by, in large part by Pete Seibert, who was 10th Mountain Division.
Bob Parker.
And Bob Parker was, he had not gone, they hadn't started Copper Mountain yet, so Bob was still working at Vail, and there were a number of, I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a guy from Missouri that would come out in the winter, a farmer that had served with Brown and Seibert, and could barely make it down the mountain on skis, but he was great with radios. And then, of course, you can imagine how the technology and the ski areas at that time was about one step above World War II stuff, and this guy took care of the radios and that kind of thing. So there was a big 10th Mountain military flavor to Vail at that time.
Sarge Brown ran it 24/7, and he'd show up at 2 or 3 in the morning. I've been told. Yeah. Well, did Sarge have any comments to you about when you were going in the Army?
He gave me a lot of static because I was going in what's called a direct commission. Basically, you just raise your right hand, you're sworn in as an officer.
Yeah.
And he used to tell me how easy I was getting off on that. But what a wonderful man, and have fond memories of him and the little bit that I knew Mr. Seibert. They're really people that you really admire. And
I'll be with Sarge in a couple of weeks, so I'll give my regards
okay.
from you, Joe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's drop back a little bit to Korea. You know, times have changed. When you and I were over in the Far East there, you in Korea and me in Vietnam, we didn't have emails. We didn't have a lot of the amenities that they have today. So I'd just like to ask how you stayed in touch with your family during your Korea time.
I bought a little tape recorder, a little reel-to-reel
I remember those
tape recorder,
recorders.
and
Yeah.
so I would send little recordings to my mom and dad, and then write letters. And I can tell you one thing: mail call was very, very important. You really look forward to getting a letter from somebody. And I tell a funny story about a guy I served with that when we were in San Antonio, he got his orders for Korea right out of the officer basic. And so the day after he got his orders, he goes in to talk to the TAC officer, and the guy said, "Well, are you happy about your orders?" He said, "Oh," he said, "I'm so happy." He said, I talked to my dad last night. He sent him my golf clubs and everything." I said, "Are you sure you know where you're going?" He said, "Well, I must be going to San Francisco." He said, "I'm going to, it's San Francisco, and the zip code is, you know, whatever
FBO
Korea
or
was."
whatever,
Yeah. And the guy says, "No, you're not going to San Francisco. You're going to Korea."
You go to Korea. Oh my gosh. Well, what was the food like there in the hospital?
You know, we really had, I think because of it being a hospital, we had very good food. Sometimes I remember we seemed to get into a cycle where the only thing that they were serving was liver, and that was not one of our favorites. But the dietitian found out that this Korean Marine unit had got a lot of ham. And so he traded the old Army way of doing things. You trade. So he traded liver for ham, which made me very happy because I don't care for liver.
I don't
But I think we got fed, you know, really very good, and both the patients in the hospital and then, you know, the food that we got to eat.
Did you live in the BOQ or did you live off base?
No, everybody had to live in BOQ, and so there were about 7 of us in a Quonset hut. There was a series of Quonset huts that were put together, and so you had an individual room and then shared bath facilities, and then we had a mama-san that did our laundry and cleaned our rooms, and so we lived pretty well, really. I mean, you know, it wasn't fancy, but for somebody not very far out of college, it was pretty nice.
That's good. Do you remember if there were any entertainers that came over there, like USO shows? I know Bob Hope came in Vietnam to the bigger bases. Were there any for you?
The only one that I remember was, and I don't remember their names, they were so far down the list of entertainers, but it was a husband and wife that were off of Broadway, and they played the part of Little Abner and Daisy May on Broadway, and they came, but because of Vietnam going on at the same time, really the headliner entertainers went to Vietnam, and we didn't get any of the headliners at least while I was in Korea.
I was up on the DMZ in Vietnam, and of course we didn't get the Bob Hope shows, but we did get some USO girls, which was great, and we had Robert Mitchum came up, and Dandy Don Meredith, the football player, and John Steinbeck, and there was a real effort to reach out to the troops.
Right.
That's what you say, that all the entertainers were down in Vietnam.
Yeah, we felt fortunate because we did have, being at a hospital, we had female personnel. We had nurses and the Red Cross gals, and there were some civilian. So if you had a dance, at least there was some females to dance with. And when you got up on the DMZ in Korea, where the 2nd Infantry Division was, and the 7th Infantry Division, of course, they didn't have any females with them. So we felt pretty fortunate.
You were with 600 incidents up there, which is today's the first day I'd heard about it, because I was on my own DMZ in Vietnam, so I wasn't aware of that, Joe.
Yeah.
Well, when your service ended, you were in Denver, and you had a three-year tour, so to speak. Did you have any benefits from the VA, i.e. schooling or housing, that you took advantage of?
I didn't complete it, but the only VA benefit I've ever used is I used some of the schooling to start work on an MBA, and like I said, I did not complete it, but those are the only VA benefits I've used, but they were certainly there for me had I wanted to. I never did use my my house loan kind of thing, but those kinds of things were nice to have in place. Yeah.
Well, how long were you, and where were you before you moved to Aspen?
After leaving Fitzsimmons, I took a job as director of rehabilitation at Memorial Hospital in Colorado Springs, which is the city hospital, and from there went to Oklahoma City, and ended up spending 17 years in Oklahoma City, and first as a director of rehabilitation at a hospital in Oklahoma City, and then in private practice, and then in 1987 was able to move back to Colorado and purchased the practice of Millard Kelly, who was getting ready to retire here.
Millard Kelly, I knew him personally. He was a trainer for the Detroit Lions.
Right.
He's buried in the Basalt Cemetery. We put a flag on his headstone. He was a U.S. Navy.
Right.
He must have been a corpsman or something to have some medical training, to be a training for the Detroit Lions. He was my neighbor up in Mountain Valley. I knew Millard pretty well.
Yeah, Kelly was an interesting guy. He was PT and certified athletic trainer, and had been the trainer at Purdue and at Michigan State, and then later with the Lions. He was one of the very first physical therapists in the NFL, because in the old days, guys just taped ankles. They kind of on-the-job training, and this is a kind of a little aside. Kelly was the first trainer to get a team to do weightlifting, and he literally went to like Montgomery Ward's and bought a set of weights and put them in a storage room in his office in Detroit, and guys would come and lift weights in the off season. Well, now the weight room that the Broncos has is probably $3 or $4 million, just for the weight room. So I mean, the Aspen High School has, which by the way, the original weight room at Aspen High School was because of Kelly raising money and getting it started. So. Yeah.
So when you came here, I believe you were at the Airport Business Center.
Yeah,
your therapy.
He had an office. The office is still at the ABC. It was Liza Balkan is the therapist that has that practice now. But between Kelly and my years and now Liza, that practice has been out at the ABC. This is the 30th year. So
That's good.
yeah.
Well, when you came, your children and my children grew up together. Tara Beth used to figure skate with my daughter Heather, and Matt and Jeremy played hockey together. And we'll talk about your kids, but I'll never forget the time our high school hockey team was down in Dallas playing in the regionals, and Jeremy was goalie and Matt was there, and Aaron Eberhardt dislocated his shoulder, and you taped it up, and he's now a doctor in training and went out and played, and we did really well, but we had some real experiences with that hockey team.
It's a lot of fun.
A lot of fun it was. A lot of fun. Well, let's bring us up to date right now, Joe. You're at Aspen Valley Hospital.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I retired from physical therapy soon to be 5 years ago, and for now, a little over a year, I've worked up at the hospital in administration, and I'm the patient advocate for the hospital, and it's kind of a it's called patient representative, patient advocate. I see each of the patients every day, work with the families, try to kind of fill in the gaps, those kinds of issues that come up that are not something the nurses and the doctors do. And it's a great job for me. I really enjoy it, and it keeps me in the community, and I'm very pleased to be up there doing it.
you know, the community's really happy. The hospital, my wife works up there as a volunteer, and you make things go for the patients up there. Well, Joe, let's talk a little bit about the military history in your family, and I want to talk about Tara Beth and Jeremy specifically. I understand there was a grandfather in the Air Force.
Yeah, my even going back a little further than that, my mother had 7 brothers, and 5 of them were in during the Second World War, and only one of those, my mother's deceased, and only one of her brothers is still alive, and his daughter he's finally, after all these years, starting to talk about the 57 missions that he did from England into Germany, and she's trying to put together a history of that, which I'm very happy he's finally talking about that. But you know, 5 of them served in the Second World War. My father-in-law went in during toward the end of the Second World War. I was in the Army Air Corps and a pilot, and then got out, went to school, got called back up for Korea, and then just stayed in and retired as a colonel from the Air Force. Taught at the Air Force Academy, and flew B-52s for many years with Strategic Air Command. My wife, I'm divorced now, but my wife's 2 brothers both went to the Air Force Academy, and then my youngest boy, Jeremy, graduated in '03 from the Air Force Academy. And then Tara, my daughter, graduated from the Uniformed Services University, which is the military medical school in Bethesda, Maryland, and is in the last year of her residency as a general surgeon. So she is a lieutenant in the Navy, but I'll brag a little bit here, is about to be promoted to lieutenant commander in May. Made the promotion list a year early. And Jeremy is a infantry captain, ranger, instructor at Fort Benning, Georgia.
Let's talk a little bit about Joe. Obviously, you know, there's a strong military support of your family and serving our country, and your families to be proud of yourself and the family serving. However, we witnessed here in Aspen this last week, we worked with the Disabled American Veterans. We had over 400 here. We had World War II veteran was 85 and Korean, and we had 67 from Walter Reed, Afghanistan, and Iraq, and we had 55 women here. And things are pretty tough over there. And as far as the trauma, you know, the triage level is so high over in Iraq and Afghanistan with the helicopters and the field medical hospitals that I've been reading that in World War II, for every two wounded, one died. In Korea and Vietnam, it was like 3 or 4 to 1 dying, and then in Iraq, for every 16 wounded, 1 dies. So we have, looking down the pike, there's going to be a lot of, and there is a demand for medical services and treatment from this Iraq and Afghanistan war. And do you have any thoughts about the projections on how that's going to turn out and what we should do?
Well, fortunately, from Jeremy's standpoint, he did a year in Iraq, but made it through even though he was in the streets almost every day without a scratch. So I'm not having to deal with it from a personal level. And I think the injuries are different than even what we saw in Vietnam. These roadside bombs, where so many of the injuries come from, just create massive wounds, and the core of the body, the trunk and everything, is pretty well protected, but the extremities are not, and they're very vulnerable. So we're seeing a lot of amputees, a lot of head trauma, because there's vulnerability around the head, and you can have severe head injuries even with the improvement of the Kevlar helmets. You can have severe head injuries, and it be a closed head injury, not an open wound. So the injuries, I think, have changed, and these are certainly devastating. And I think you don't realize kind of the impact those injuries. Most of us don't stop and think that that goes on for a long time for the person, the rest of that person's life, and they can live many, many years. It impacts the family, it impacts the community, it was certainly disappointing to hear and see some of the stories coming out of Walter Reed this last year, and hopefully that has generated some improvement of the care. I think we're seeing, because of the deployments and the multiple deployments, we're seeing a lot of post-traumatic stress kinds of things, and I think that's probably a real gap right now, that some of those don't get taken care of like they should.
Family issues, suicides.
Right.
It's really tough.
Yeah.
You know, I'd like to take my hat off to the community of Aspen for the support that they give to the disabled veterans. At the Elks Lodge, we get phone calls from the whole community. How can we help? You know, everybody go to the airport, or help with the skiing, or help with the scuba diving, or help with the climbing, or help with the shooting, or the meals, or everything. And so I feel, you know, even though that war is over there, when our people in Aspen see these veterans in their wheelchairs around town, it drives the point home.
Yeah, I would think you'd agree with me on this, Dick. You certainly experienced it from a true combat sense in Vietnam, but it was hard for people during the Vietnam period to separate the politics from the soldier. And I think as a country and as communities, we've done a better job. And so regardless of how you feel about our policies, or whether we should even be in Iraq or Afghanistan, we appreciate the sacrifice that those soldiers are making, that his families are making, and we're honoring them. And I can certainly remember instances during the Vietnam period that if you had a uniform on, you know, you were somewhat reviled, which, you know, the Vietnam vet was simply doing his job. He was,
We were, you know, we killed the messenger and didn't take the message to Washington. But the thing, Joe, that's happening though, is, as you mentioned, the stress is that the deployments are long. They're up to 15 months, and you get over there for a year and extend. We had the draft going on in Vietnam, and we had the size of the Marine Corps today is 180,000. Well, in Vietnam we had in the Corps 365,000. So we were there for a year and back for a year. So yeah, it was tough being over there, but the stress factor wasn't there that we either they got out after Vietnam or you were held back. Today, let's say, as far as the Marine Corps goes, if a young man enlists for 4 years in the infantry, he's going to do 7 months over, 7 back, 7 over. That's 21 months of combat. Where in Vietnam, on a 4-year enlistment, unless you wanted to extend, it'd be 1 year. So the stress level is there. We don't have, I'm not advocating the draft, but I'm saying when we did have it, we had the manpower, and the stress level was high, but not as high as we have over in Iraq and Afghanistan today. So we're going right this very minute. You know, there are issues that are being discussed nationally and in Congress that hopefully will get resolved.
I certainly hope so.
I hope so too. Well, Joe, we've covered a lot of bases. Is there anything that we've missed here today, or that you'd like to add to this interview? We appreciate you coming down from the hospital and taking the time to be with us today.
Well, it's you mentioned about the disabled veterans coming in. When I got to Fitzsimmons in 1968, the year before, they had started a program of taking the Vietnam vets skiing. And in those days, we went to Arapahoe Basin. And it was a combined program with Children's Hospital. So you'd take a bus of the Vietnam vets up, and then Children's would bring kids up. And it worked great because the little kids looked up to the vets, and the vets weren't about to let the little kids outdo them. And another Aspen connection that I met at that time was a guy named Ed Lukes. Ed Lukes. And Ed was a pharmacist in Denver at that time, and they donated their time as instructors at A Basin. And it so changed Ed's life that they ended up moving to Snowmass, and he, you know, is virtually I think probably would be the father of the handicapped ski program in our community, and Challenge Aspen and all that. I mean, he laid the groundwork for a lot of that. But it's great for me to see, having seen that in the early stages where we were basically making things up as we went because there wasn't adaptive equipment, and now seeing you know, the mono skis, and then even just seeing the changes in the prosthetics. The sad thing is that we have to have that stuff because of the war going on, but the technology has changed so much, and seeing how well the guys can walk on their prostheses, and you know, just the new technology is really fascinating to me, of seeing that change. And I just don't think we can do enough for those people that have sacrificed so much.
We call the program, the Winter Sports Clinic, a miracle on a mountainside.
Yeah.
And we have right today some of the disabled veterans living in this community, training for the Olympic Games in 2010. They're held right after the disabled, and these guys are really good, competitive. I'd just like to mention a couple of other things that the Winter Sports Clinic does. And I've noticed over the years is that when the veterans come, they just don't come here on their own. They need support. They need nurses or therapists or wives and the families. And I've met families, and one of the most heartwarming experiences I've had, I volunteered to teach dependents. The soldier's out here learning on he's paralyzed, and he's learning to ski on a sled, and I'm teaching the wife, and they're from Florida, they've never seen snow, and I got her to skiing down to the bottom of Fanny Lift, and he came down there, and they hugged each other, you know what I mean, because the wives give so much support on a 24-hour basis to these veterans. You just don't realize, well, you do, how much, what a demand and what a sacrifice that the wives and the children make, you know. The other thing that happened this year for the first time ever, we had 55 women, and as we have deployments in Iraq, specifically, the women are exposed to more injuries because they're not in combat per se, but they're driving the supply trucks up and down the roads, and they're getting hit by the IEDs. And so we had 55 of them, and Owsley out at Woody Creek, at the Woody Creek Community Center, had 55 women together out there for a tea and desserts. And I talked to the ladies afterwards. They said this is what we needed, for the women to be able to be together, and for their issues are separate from the men. And so this is the start of a program that Ann's developing for next year, and it's leading into advocacy for the women to have their say, because there's more and they need to be heard and cared for.
Yeah, I'm sure you've noticed this too. You'll talk to some of the younger guys, the Iraq, Afghanistan vets, when they come in, and you can kind of see a trepidation in their face. They don't know what they're getting themselves into. They're maybe a little sullen. You maybe think you see a little anger. And after a week here, and then you see them at the airport on the way out, and you know, their whole demeanor has changed. And this is just such a wonderful activity for them. I remember when I was working with them back in the 60s, having one guy say, you know, people say, why in the world do I want to ski? And he said, it was important to me because I didn't ski before I lost my leg. And now I'm doing something that I didn't do before. And I think by coming here, they gain so much confidence. And then they share with the Vietnam vet that went down this path 40 years ago, and they can learn about how those people have adapted and the trials and tribulations that they've gone through, so that you don't feel like you're the only one going through it. And this is just such a wonderful program, and you know, Aspen's blessed to be able to host it. And everybody I talk to really feel that. They feel that way. They're so happy for it to be in our community.
I know personally some of the ladies that, Kim Breaker and Sam, that participate, they get flowers on their birthday from the disabled veterans. And I'm out at the airport, you know, and I have a blind Marine, and he can't see, obviously, when he gets off, but he asks, where's the colonel, you know? And if I'm not there, boy, I hear about it. And so we've bonded with these. There's new ones every year, but the old ones.
By the way, I have reconnected via email. Somehow or other, you and I got to talking a couple of years ago about one of my former patients. Remember Jim Bernardi?
Right, I remember.
And you gave me an email address, and Jim and I have reconnected 40 years later. Jim had lost both legs and an arm in Vietnam, and I had worked with him at Fitzsimmons, and it's been really I haven't got to see him personally. Hopefully he hasn't been up for the clinic for a number of years, but thanks to you and happenstance, I've been able to reconnect with him on via email.
We're getting so much networking
Yeah,
going. And
yeah.
in my particular case, I'm going back to my 50th reunion back in Quantico, Virginia in June. And I haven't seen a lot of these officers for 50 years. One of them I'm looking forward to seeing is Jim Mora, who was in my
Sure,
platoon,
yeah.
went on to coach the Saints and
Yeah.
Indianapolis Colts. And, you know, we're older now, but our hearts are, you know, with our comrades and the fact that we serve, we're proud. And Joe, thank you for coming down here today and sharing.
Thanks, Dick.
These,
I really appreciate the opportunity.
And I got a few tears in my eyes, Joe. Thank you.